So thank you everybody for coming today. This is our second webinar involving connecting to culture. So with that, I'd like to introduce Judy Weber.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to have you here listening with us all, and especially our partners. I'm so happy that our partners are coming along on this journey with us. At our last webinar, last symposium that we had, we talked about a specific ethnic group, and I think that in our effort to become culturally responsive, it is important to understand those different ethnic groups and in particular what their experiences are, so that we could have a deeper understanding of those groups, and then we would be able to check perhaps some of our assumptions that lead us to inadvertently making decisions that could result in further bias or inequity against those families. And so that aspect of cultural responsiveness is very important to us all, and I encourage us to continue to learn more about other groups. But the key for me is for us to, more importantly, pay attention to our own reactions and in particular our own behaviors, because I believe very strongly that it is not the other group's issue. Instead, it is the dominant culture's problem in terms of how we have not recognized the biases that we have, and we have at times unconsciously allowed those biases to have an impact on the decisions that we make. And so I want us to really be clear about the fact that it is the dominant culture that needs to look at itself. It is the dominant culture that needs to look at the way we behave and impact those different ethnic groups. There's also, different socioeconomic groups, etc. So I'll leave that point there. The second thing I wanted to make really explicit to everybody is that we are going to quickly move from understanding and education to action. I believe that we have made tremendous strides over the past 5, even 10 years, and I need to acknowledge each and every one of you who have been on this journey with us all along, and including those folks who have come along even in our more recent past. You are helping us to sustain the changes that we have made, and you are helping us to continue to do better by the kids and families that we serve. My call to action today for you all is timely. And so the question is why now? We all are aware of what is happening in our country, sparked by the death of George Floyd. In addition, the COVID-19 that revealed severe inequities in how that pandemic was affecting communities of color and lower socioeconomic communities. And so we know that there are inequities in our country. We know that we are part of the system, if you will, and we must also acknowledge that we have had a role in contributing to those inequities. And so I plan to have those inequities of our system become our focus going forward. And so now that we know better, now that we have more information, I have to promote that call to action, because if we know better, then we need to do better. We have a responsibility to be proactive in how we respond to those communities, and I want us to begin to study how our structures and how our policies and even how some of our procedures are having an impact on the continuation of those inequities, so that we could consciously strive to change those actions on our part, so that we are doing better by the kids and families. So it begs the questions: what role do we play in perpetuating the inequities in our system? And then more importantly, how can we change those roles? Next slide. So this is a pretty charged quote. It says, "The ultimate racist act is knowing about it and not doing anything about it." I got that quote from Kevin Campbell, and I really want to give him the acknowledgement that is due, because it is his mentoring and his coaching that has had a profound impact on me as we have been moving through this journey now for, like I said, over 5 years. And so In a call with him this week, he really challenged us as an organization, recognizing the progress that we had made, but also put forth the challenge around, and he framed them in some powerful questions. And so I want to share with all you those powerful questions. Like I said earlier, how can we move from understanding to action? It is no longer enough that we know. It is now incumbent on us to take action so that we're actually doing something about it. Otherwise, then we're consciously perpetuating those inequities and perpetuating the system that has resulted in those inequities. I don't want to be a part of that, and I'm sure you don't either. How can we create a culture of teaming and teamwork that has families at the center of our practice? This is extremely different than our history. Our history has been based on vertical case management, a single caseworker responsible for a case, perhaps consulting with their supervisor, but really operating in isolation. And I am challenging us to break away from that isolation, to really begin to accept and use consultation as a cornerstone of the social work that we are responsible to do, to invite other disciplines to help us in addressing the overall issues of the family, for us to no longer simply focus on whether or not abuse occurred, but to understand what were the contributing factors to that situation and how might we proactively bring in services and supports to shore up the family, strengthen their resilience, leverage their capabilities, and help them to put the pieces back together so that we don't have to disrupt that family. Our intervention should not become a part of the family's life portrait. We should be able to help those families keep the children safe. I'll never ask you to compromise the safety of children, but it's important for us to know that one person's safety is another's terror. The idea of removing a child for reasons of safety, while laudable, I think is really important for us to also realize that it will have a traumatic impact, not only on the child, but also on that family. Again, we talked about what are the structures and practices that perpetuates the inequities that we see. I'm going to call out one thing specifically that comes to mind. The idea of bringing law enforcement with us when we go out on calls. I understand that there are times when we absolutely have to be aware of our own safety needs. And so when we bring law enforcement with us, it is out of a real need. We believe there is a need to have law enforcement. But again, if we reflect on our current social situation right now, we know that law enforcement is not always seen the same by different communities, especially those communities of color. And so if we bring law enforcement with us, we have to be very conscious that that changes the dynamic of the interaction and very much can inhibit our ability to engage with that family in a helping way. And so I want us to think about that. Think about when we bring law enforcement with us and whether or not it's absolutely necessary. How might we be able to perhaps leverage a different helping system so that we're not changing that dynamic right from the gate. We are not part of law enforcement, we are social workers, and I fully expect us to portray ourselves as helpers. I think that we also need to challenge ourselves and ask ourselves, where do we want to be? If we don't want to be part of the systemic racism and the inequities that occur in our systems, where do we want to be? And what are the steps that are going to get us there? I've always been really clear with you all that I don't have all the answers. I am humble enough to know that I need each and every one of you to join with me. I need each and every one of you to be leaders in your own right. I need each and every one of you to provide us with input and feedback around the changes that we're pursuing. Tell us what works and what doesn't work. Tell us what we're not doing and what you think needs to be done. I need you. We all need you. Kids and families need you to be a part of this change. then how will we know when things have changed? How will we know? What are we going to measure? What should we be measuring? Again, I think all of you will have input to that, but make no mistake, we intend to evaluate ourselves and hold ourselves accountable and hold one another accountable for the changes that we believe that we need to make. Simply put, how can we be the justice that we want to see? That's a powerful question, and I think it calls for each and every one of us to reflect and to really do some deep reflection around how can I portray justice for the communities in need. Next slide. I think I talked a little bit about this already. Symposium number 1, it was around increasing our understanding of the Latino population, specifically the indigenous population in our county. It was around increasing empathy perhaps, but not sympathy. I don't think any community wants us to feel sorry for them, but I do think that it is helpful for us to understand another's experience in order to gain empathy for them, to walk alongside with them, to get close to the work with them. But that in no way means that we could blame them for the struggles that we were having, because we are not allowed to impose our dominant cultural beliefs on those other communities. It simply is not right, and it's not just. And so that's where I caution us. Do not look externally for the solutions that are oftentimes internal to the family. That means that we have to engage that family, we have to know that family, and we have to really understand the entire picture. Comprehensive biopsychosocial, cultural, environmental assessment. As social workers, we are trained to do that. We have to understand that as part of the system, we have things that we need to change. It's not our families, it's not our communities, it's us. People might think that, well, if they are abusing alcohol and it's impacting their families, of course they need to change. But we have to think about what are the drivers that have brought this family to this state. What are those drivers that brought the family to this condition? And what can we do as helpers to begin to change that situation? How can we work with the family to change that situation? Who else do I need to bring into this picture? Who else could be of help? Where's the extended family? Where's the support network? How can I set it up so this family is going to be whole when I leave, and I'm going to do everything that I can do not to have them be at risk of coming back into the system? That's what our job is. In essence, it's about how can we bring the humanity back into our daily practice? How can we treat them as people, as humans, not a case, not a referral, not a chart, not any of those words that we use to dehumanize the process that we're in. Make no mistake, we are in a human exchange process, and we have to keep that in the forefront of our minds as we're doing our work. Bring the humanity back into our daily practice. That's what I'm asking of you. That's why I think we need to continue with these symposiums and these efforts and these conversations that we have. Next slide. So this is a call to action. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick, but we're going to take action. And this is going to call for all of us to be bold and courageous leaders. I've said to you many times, leadership is a function, it's not a role. I'm not the only leader in this organization. If I was there in front of you on a podium, I could look out and I could see your faces, and I will call to mind examples of leadership on the part of many of you. And so don't underestimate what a small group of people could do. I think that's Mark Wheatley's quote. So we have the capacity, we have the ability to make those changes. We have to hold each other accountable. That is very important in our core practice model. We believe that, but it is different than we have functioned in the past. And so when we see comments like the family doesn't speak English, when we hear there is no one, we have to challenge those statements. We have to challenge one another. We have to hold each other accountable for those microaggressions, I might call them, that really keep us stagnant in our ways. Ask ourselves, what are we going to be intolerant of? What are we going to be intolerant of? We have already showed that we are intolerant of longer stays in care. I'll tell you, for the first 10 years of my tenure in this organization, we usually had about 300 kids in care who were in care 3 years or longer. Those numbers have drastically declined. I think we're somewhere around 100 right now. That's because of you. That's because of the work that each and every one of you have done. You've already showed that we're intolerant of keeping kids in care too long. So we're going to do the work differently. CFT and family times are ripe for change. I've already identified those two things as what I believe are key areas in terms of practice changes. I want to know what you think. I want us to go around, and I want our executive team to meet with each and every one of you and understand what it is that you believe will change, because I'm open to your input, but make no mistake, we will begin to pursue change. Next slide. Action has to follow learning. If we know better, we have to do better. We know better. We've brought the information forward. We've lived the new way of doing work. Now it's time for us to bring it to scale. We can't just have pockets of good practice. We can't have programs that are having good outcomes. We need to build a system that supports families and keeps them together. It's time to tell the truth. It's time to call out whatever we're doing that keeps us from achieving family reunification, that keeps us from being able to keep families together. We have to hold each other accountable, and we have to tell the truth, even when the truth is hard to hear. I want to look at CFTMs, and I want to look at family time, and I want to create specific structural changes in those key areas. The good news is that I've always told you that I don't have all the answers, and I'm okay with that. But I know you do. I know you have the answers to what we can do to make these things better. And I want you to step up. I want you to be a part of this change, and I'm going to rely on you to help me do it. We have our belief statements, and they have to be more than words on a wall. We have to bring them to life. And to bring them to life, we have to challenge the way that we're doing things. It's possible, though. We have to look at what we're doing and how that's perpetuating racism, how it's perpetuating the inequities that we see in our system, and we simply must stop doing them. We know better, so we have to stop doing them. I believe that we do this by bringing forward our wholehearted self. Kevin said that to take the emotion out of this work is a play right out of the colonizer's playbook. When we don't feel, we dehumanize, and it allows us to make decisions that will have negative impacts on families for generations to come. If we bring our wholehearted self forward, though, and we feel with that family as if what is happening to them could happen to us, and what would we do to help ourselves, then it can change the outcome. We are very powerful in that way, so we have the ability to change our outcome. So if I'm not too far along, I want to share a story with you. It's a powerful story, and I hope it resonates with you. Once upon a time, there was a mom. This mom was recently divorced. She had 4 kids. She worked so hard to provide for her kids, and she just wasn't making enough money. So the rent wasn't getting paid. There was no money in the house, no food. There was no food in the house. And she was really, really struggling, and so she didn't know what to do, and so she started to drink. Without any food, the 4 kids, they were ages 16 to 10 years old. They were fending for themselves as best as they can. The teenage son was stealing from fast food restaurants to feed his brothers and sisters. We were waiting for my mom to get out of the bed to be able to take care of us because we were all alone. The utilities got turned off. No light, no gas, no food. Eviction notice. Mom drunk in bed. And there was a knock on the door. And whoever was at that door was gonna create one of 2 things. They were either gonna help or they were gonna destroy that family. I want you to think about who you are when you knock on that door. Are you gonna be a colonizer? Are you gonna be somebody who helps? Or are you gonna be somebody who destroys? I want you and I need you to be somebody who helps. Because when somebody knocked on the door at that household, I thank God that it was a helper. It was a helper who helped that woman get out of bed, get sober. They helped her turn the electricity back on. They helped her get to the welfare department, and even though she had to sit there for 8 hours, she didn't leave until she had food stamps for her kids. She got help in sending her kids back to school because they hadn't been to school in about a month. And she helped this woman put the pieces together. I tell you this story because this is my story. My life could have turned out drastically different than it has. And I am so thankful that it was a helper who knocked on our door, because who knows what would happen. So if you're ever wondering why I am so passionate, if you are ever wondering why I will not stop until I change things, now you know. Now you know who I am. Now you know my story. Now you know why I will not stop fighting for our kids and families. Because there are so many other little girls and little boys out there who are just waiting for their chance to make a difference. And they matter. And those moms matter. And those dads matter. And so I hope you use my story and think about it when you're knocking on that door, because you can change lives, and I hope you use it for the good. I am so proud to work with you all. I trust you all. That is why I've decided to tell you my story. And I hope you keep it with you as you do your work. As hard as it is for me to tell you, I'm glad I did. I'm glad you know, and I hope you do something with it. Let's get to action. Let's get to doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. I really appreciate it. And I just really want to honor your vulnerability and putting it out there. And for everybody, I'm not crying, you're crying. Thank you, Judy. It was very powerful. Your words and your slides were powerful, and your story and helping to understand where you come from is very powerful. So thank you for your leadership on this. Okay, we're gonna transition into some digital stories. Before I do that, a couple of things is we are still working on translation. So for those who are looking for translation services, give us like 5 more minutes. We're gonna try one more thing. The other thing is we know this is a long webinar. We do not have a break built in, but if folks need to stretch, feel free to stretch. If they need to just to go to the restroom, feel free to go to the restroom. We are recording this. And so if there's anything that you missed, you are welcome to watch the recording and see this recording. Before I start the digital stories, I'd like to thank Sandra Nolan for working really, really hard on arranging all of the pieces to make this work. And then also Gail and Rashid Ali from Digital Rain, who worked very hard with us to turn this, what would have been a 4-day in-person workshop to get these done, into a virtual event to turn these around relatively quickly. So thank you. And Judy, I hope you're reading the chats right now. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to stop screen sharing. I'm going to have my technical partner, Michelle Darden, help me with that piece, and she'll share the videos.
Nicaragua, vinimos de El Salvador, vinimos de Sinaloa, vinimos de Oaxaca, abandonamos nuestra vida para aprovechar. Siempre trabajando, nunca ganando, la vida está peleando, no hay tiempo para gozar.
I was born in Colacán, Sinaloa. My dad's from Guerrero and my mom from Oaxaca. In Mexico, many families have to decide between school or work. Both of my parents had to choose work. My mom finished her 3rd year of school. My dad did not attend school at all. He made sure that we went to school because he didn't want us to struggle. My dad traveled to different cities in Mexico to find work. Someone told him in the United States jobs pay better than Mexico. A year later, he asked my mom to come and join him in the US. My mom decided to leave my siblings and me with my grandparents in Mexico. When I lived with my grandparents, I went to school for a few years. I had to drop out to look for a job to help my brother and my 2 sisters. I was taking care of sheep, goats, and cows and planting corn and beans. Most of the time, we ate natural food, herbs, mushrooms, pickled pears that we didn't need to pay for. My mom came back to Mexico to bring the 4 of us kids to the United States. I thought it was gonna be easy, but it was not. We walked through the desert for 4 days. We didn't have a lot of food or water. I was so scared. I prayed that we will make it to the United States. When I arrived in the United States, the language barrier made me feel alone. I couldn't have a conversation with anybody. I didn't speak Spanish nor English at all. I only spoke my own language, which is Mixteco. I was laughed at whenever I tried to talk. I only knew one response, no sé. They called me names and made fun of me. I was 12 when I first came to this country. Finding a job was important, but in the bottom of my heart, education was my passion. We moved to Oxnard from Santa Ana when I was 16. I spent more than 6 years working in the field as a farm worker, under the sun and in the rain. I always had the idea to go back to school while I was working hard to earn some money for food to share with my family. 4 years ago, I finally went back to school. When President Obama signed a dream act that inspired me to succeed.
Amend our nation's immigration policy to make it more fair more efficient, and more just, specifically for certain young people, sometimes called dreamers.
Now I am balancing work and school. My dream since I was a kid in Mexico is to become an engineer. I want to help my mom and dad because they work so hard in the field. The strawberry season is the hardest. We spend long hours. The more we pick, the more money we make. When we come home, we just want to take a shower, eat, and sleep. Nowadays, I spend lots of time reading. I read physics and chemistry books. Reading helps me with my English. I spend all night studying scientific terms. My mom and dad went through so much for us. My biggest dream is to buy a house to help my family.
Siempre trabajando, nunca ganando la.
Young age language. There's a little girl sitting in her room far away, sad, afraid, and confused. The world as she knew it will forever fade away. The little girl sits in her room, holds on to the memories of the person who once tucked her in bed. Going into foster care at age 11 was a cultural shock. I didn't fit in. Americans saw my skin and hair color and automatically assumed that I was Mexican and spoke Spanish. On the other hand, Hispanics viewed me as not one of them because I did not speak their language. Before coming to the U.S., I had great memories of my father and I always cooked and ate dinner together. However, oftentimes in foster care, I ate separately from the rest of the family. Many foster parents struggled to understand me because I was struggling to overcome the physical, emotional, and sexual abuse I endured at such a young age. I didn't understand my own feelings, and I was in a strange place, alone. After moving to 6 different foster homes within a year, I decided to stop feeling sorry for my situation. Knowing that I had no control on where I was placed, the only thing I could control was my studies. So I did. Graduating high school with one of the highest GPAs. Now I'm studying to become a doctor of veterinary medicine. Many people ask me how and when I decided to become a veterinarian. And the answer was simple. I just love animals. But the more honest response is that as a foster kid, I could relate to them, such as they are innocent, defenseless, and speechless. This is how I felt during my time in care. Now, I have an amazing family. A mom who took me in during the time I was most broken. She helped me rebuild myself and showed me how amazing the world is. She helped me become a better mother to my daughter. When people meet us nowadays, they always say, "You're a hero to your daughter." But the reality is, she's my hero. My daughter is the reason I'm still alive today. She's the reason I didn't let my past define our future.
Michelle, that's Claudia's, and we don't have sound.
The little
Nope, that's still the wrong one. All right, I'll do it. I'll do it from my side. It's okay. Screen share. Yep. Okay. Here. Nayeli's.
I migrated from Oaxaca, Mexico to the US when I was 10 years old, leaving behind my family, my home, my friends, and my dog. Like many other immigrants, my parents decided it was best to bring their children to El Norte in search of a better future. When I arrived to the US, everything seemed to be fine until I found myself having an identity within an identity. I was not accepted by other Mexicans because I'm indigenous, and I was not accepted by others because I'm brown. I remember hiding in the closet, crying as I asked myself why. I could not understand why people would call me Oaxaquita, as if it was a crime to say where I come from. Not knowing the language made it very challenging to survive in a society where I was expected to succeed and make my parents proud. At the same time, my parents were struggling to provide for their children. I did not want to create more stress for my parents, so I never shared with them about the bullying racism, discrimination, and oppression that I endured for years. I went from feeling like I did not belong to connecting to my identity. I've taken it upon myself to embrace my culture by creating awareness about the language, traditions, and cultural practices from my Mixteco community. La música y la danza me transportan al lugar donde crecí y pasé los mejores momentos de mi vida bailando chilenas al son de la banda. Empowerment, respect, and advocacy have paved my path to working with underserved communities. Connecting to my community and maintaining connections with those I have left behind have been key in my journey to become a better human being. I still remember those days when I was a child running barefoot from one place to another while chasing the dogs, the goats, and the turkeys as my mother tried to stop me from getting hurt. There's nothing like knowing I have a place I can call home and return to, and that home is my beloved Unión de Cárdenas, Huixtlahuaca, Oaxaca.
Okay, thank you. Those were pretty powerful videos, some powerful stories. And, you know, listening to those stories and Judy's stories, you know, I wonder what the impact might be if we were to spend time, really the time it needs for us to get to know our families in this way, to get to know our colleagues in this way, to go deeper and understand their stories, you know, thicken the story, as you know, we like to say from Kevin Campbell. How does slowing down help us achieve the we believe statements? Like each of those statements, you know, when we slow down and do this work, that helps us get a little bit closer to fulfilling, you know, those statements through our actions. And I also wonder the impact, you know, what would happen if we didn't do that? If we don't slow down, if we don't get to know families, if we don't get to know ourselves, and how potentially our own stories, you know, impact the work that we do with families. So thank you to Claudia and Alberto and Nayeli for, again, taking the time, participating in these workshops, and sharing these stories. So next, I'd like to introduce Noe Villa, who is a manager with CFS. So Noe, you can go ahead and turn on your camera. And then we'll go ahead and have all of our other panelists turn them on. Noe, I'll have you go ahead and do the introductions.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. We have Israel Vasquez, and Israel is our Farm Resources Program Labor Relations Coordinator for the County of Ventura. We have Arsenio Lopez, and Arsenio is the Executive Director with MICOP, the Mixteco Indígena Community Organizing Project. We also have Euclides del Moral Arbona with El Cónsul de México here in Oxnard, and Luis López Resendiz with Cielo, Comunidades Indígenas Liderazgo. I don't know if I'm missing anybody. We're going to start off asking 5 questions, and then our presenters will present the responses to those questions. I do want to remind everybody that if you have any questions, please utilize the chat box for your questions, as there will be a Q&A after everybody presents. Oh, and buenos días, Odelia. and also Olivia Romero with Cielo, Comunidades Indígenas de Liderazgo. First, the first question, first of the 5 questions that we're going to be asking is one, we're going to have everybody reintroduce themselves and their organization. We're going to ask, how do you support and what services do you offer? What kinds of engagement strategies do you use successfully within the populations you serve? And tell us a story about a client with whom you have worked leading to a successful outcome. And what did you see that made a difference? And lastly, what do we need to know a little bit about the challenges, and if you can share those specific examples. So, Amy, do you have the slide in terms of the sequence of presenters?
Oops, sorry. I think it actually might be helpful since I've suggested that folks do gallery. So I think we have Cielo who's up first. So why don't we just stick with the gallery view for right now, and then I'll go back to the slides.
Very good.
Okay.
Cielo, so we'll kick it over to you. Thank you.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Luis Loper Resendiz. I am grateful to be here with y'all. I was just listening to those stories that you all were sharing. I'm also a Mixtec. My family is from Oaxaca, Mexico, la región Mixteca. I live here in Los Angeles County, Los Angeles, California, South Central LA. I work with Comunidades Indígenas en Liderazgo, and I am the director of the Indigenous Interpreters Program, where we train and send indigenous peoples, indigenous interpreters across the country through different cases, whether it's court, medical, schools, you name it, DMV. My job is just to work not only with Mexican indigenous migrants, but also with indigenous Guatemalans. We work with the 23 Mayan languages that are in Guatemala, plus Garipona, and we also work with the 68 indigenous languages that are spoken in Mexico. So it is a wide range of indigenous languages that we work with. And as we work with this issue of interpretation and providing interpretation services, we also bring awareness on the migration of indigenous peoples. We bring awareness on the diversity that it is within the Latinx community, and also the Mexican migration to the U.S. I will let Odilia introduce herself, so then after that we will share a video on the work that we do here in Los Angeles with indigenous migrants. Odilia?
Hi, good morning. My name is Odilia. I am the executive director of Cielo and also the binational coordinator for the Binational Front of Indigenous Organization, a political organization. And some of the work that we do, actually, it's very uncomfortable. I have a screen to share with you, if they allow me, but if not, it's okay. And our work has to be, it's about educating people about the causes of displacement of indigenous people. We just saw some powerful stories that were told not right now from them, our relatives, the Mixteco Nation. However, there's a root to that problem. There's a root of why we end up in foster care, why we end up in your Western world system. And some of the root has to do with the US and Canada policy. And it has to do with the government, both Mexico, the US, and Canada. Because I can't share the screen, but yesterday, there was a leakage of a document where the government actually acknowledges that it's an ethnocide, and I call it a genocide, that is gonna happen with the Tren Maya in southern Mexico. They sell it to us, it's gonna bring progress, because as indigenous people, for 500 years, we have been blamed of the lack of progress of the country. So the Tren Maya, if you don't know about it, I suggest you go read about it, because you're gonna have more people coming from southern Mexico from Guatemala in different parts of the country and in California specifically, because people will be forced to migrate. People will be displaced because due to this development that is happening. But actually the document actually is very open about its structural racism against indigenous peoples. They blame us for the lack of development. They blamed us for not being knowledgeable enough to exploit our natural resources. And this document is it's a Twitter trend right now because of the way they worded it. The government came back and said, oh, it was misworded, but we know it's a clear intention. Who are the people that are investing in these companies? It's US, Spain, Canada. So this is the work we do. We educate about the roots of migration. The roots of migration is what we need to learn about, what causes, and how do we play a role on that when we live in the US. The war on drugs has a direct impact on indigenous communities. It is the largest cause of migration. It has caused the displacement of Guerrero, of some areas in Oaxaca, but most drug lords are in northern Mexico. And it happens that all the money that we get goes invested in southern Mexico. Curiously, we have the largest natural resources. So this is the workshops that we do, educating people about the roots of migration and the structural racism that we face back home and that we face back here in the US, because when Latinos or when Mexicans migrate, they migrate with that racism. They migrate with that discrimination. And I'll tell you, we just had 2 incidents with the Mexican consulate in LA this week, where they did not acknowledge a person being from Mexico because he looked Indian per se, according to them. They said that he looked Guatemalan. Well, we're all from Mesoamerica. We're all relatives, so I guess we look alike, but they refused to give him his documents. They didn't respond until it became a trend topic. So it's these constant things, and the people that you have staff in your agencies, you know, like Judy said, that it takes one person to make a change, and it takes one person to be pushing from the inside to make a change. But if that person has a misconception or has a prejudice against indigenous peoples, that will not happen. That one person will put a block, is the gatekeeper, and is the person that would be supporting the violation of our human rights as people. She said that we need to be humanized. That should have been a given. We're humans. For 500 years, we've been told that we're not humans. And that concept has been reinforced over and over as indigenous people prevent the lack of development. They don't understand. They don't understand. Of course, we're not going to understand. We live in 2 different worlds. Western world is destruction, individualism, and our world is very different. It's collective. It's natural resources protecting it instead of exploiting it. So all this, and I'm not just going off, I'm telling you this because this is the cause of migration. This is the cause of displacement, and when we are here, you know, we are being discriminated by the institutions, by the employees. And I will tell you a success story with the Los Angeles Police Department. I shouldn't even be talking about them right now because they're in hot water, right? But it took one person for them, the 10,000 officers, to be carrying a card asking indigenous people, what language do you speak? And it was one person that kept on pushing and introducing us to different people until we got to the top. And one day I invited to a concert one of the police chiefs, and because he's short and brown and looks pretty Indian, he tried to come into the concert at the Mexican consulate. Guess what? They rejected him. He didn't have a uniform. He was just a plain, short chief with no feathers or anything. I'm just making a joke here. So this is constant. You know, the way we look is a curse in many ways, because with the way we look, we are discriminated in hospitals, in courts, in institutions, with the police department, And this happens every day. Every day we hear a story about indigenous people. And people that know me, I'm blunt. At this point, I'm 50. I have less years to live. If they never want to invite me to a talk again, I'm fine with it, But I'm gonna say, I say things the way I think and the way I see them. People have gone during COVID, people are reaching out to both institutions on how to get their bodies back home. That is not happening. People are getting to these other institutions, both from the US and Mexico, and they're being negated that information. I mean, it's really institutional. And the people that work in those institutions, one could make a big change. One of you could make that big change. But for you to make that big change, you need to learn, why are we migrating? What's causing our displacement? How many indigenous people are in Mexico, in Guatemala? What is your population that you're working with in Ventura County? And also learn, think about your own migration history. Why were your parents here? Why did your grandparents come? What was happening if you're from Jalisco? What was happening in Jalisco in 1970s when your parents came here? What was going on? Because we all have a root cause of migration. Sometimes we don't know it because it's within policies that push us out. But you need to learn that. You need to learn what's happening in southern Mexico, because you're going to get more people. That Tren Maya is going to get more people. The war on drugs is going to bring you more people from Guerrero here and from Michoacan, right? So you need to learn that and not make the assumption that we're here because of the American dream. There's no such thing as an American dream. Everybody has the right to education, to health services. It's a human right. It's not an American dream. And I will end with that. We all need to learn, why are we here? Why are people being displaced? And how you could be a better person is by reading, by learning, by going to listen to both sides, read, research, and that way you will serve people better, and it will be less chances of removing the child from their homes. I'm a Spanish English interpreter, and I see this very often. And once things clear up, when a family is told what they need to do in their language, things change. So that's very important for you that work in the social service area, to learn the causes of migration, and to learn, is so important, because that will make the difference. We're not here for the benefits. We have been pushed out here for people, rich people, the 1%, to benefit from the natural resources. And I will take it back to Luis so he could do that, share more of our work.
I just have a quick video I wanted to share with everyone. I think the story that Odilia shared about the man that was accused of being a Guatemalan. He had his birth certificate, and they never, I guess, when it comes to institutions like governmental institutions or non-governmental institutions, oftentimes when it comes to working with indigenous peoples, they're never given the option of an interpreter, because there's this assumption that everyone that comes from Mexico speaks Spanish. So this person was never given an interpreter. He didn't know what they were talking about until he came into our office asking for help. He was thinking actually of going to the Guatemalan consulate to see if they were going to be able to give him an ID, because all he wanted to have was an ID. He didn't have one. So these are the type of stories we get here in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is is the second largest city with most diversity when it comes to indigenous migrants. Most of the Mayan languages are spoken here, as well as many indigenous Mexican indigenous languages, amongst them Mixtec, Zapotec, Ayuk, Chinanteco, amongst others. I'm gonna share a video. I'm gonna see if I'm able to share this video. Let me share my screen. Oh, I'm not able to share a video. The whole can you put the video I sent you via email? I'm unable to share. It says that the host has to allow me.
Yep, let me try right now. Hold on one second.
Thank you. And there's a question here for Odilia while we wait. Any books that you recommend? Odilia has been sharing this book amongst us and other people's, the Drug War Capitalism by Don Paley, who is who writes about the war against drugs.
Soy una inmigrante indocumentada, pero a pesar de eso tengo un número llamado ITIN para poder hacer los taxes o los impuestos en este país cada vez que trabajo. Desde el inicio de esta pandemia, mi familia y yo hemos sufrido por no tener papeles y de no recibir apoyos federales por nuestra situación actual. Toda mi comunidad ha sido afectada, no solamente nosotros, por la falta de trabajo, lo cual nunca negamos hacer. Nosotros recibimos por parte de la organización Cielo y el California Resilient Fund un apoyo dedicado a inmigrantes indígenas aquí en Los Ángeles que ha sido de gran ayuda para mi familia y para mi gran comunidad. Las gracias no terminaremos de darles, porque en estos momentos de pandemia es cuando mi comunidad de verdad lo necesita y lo retribuimos con el trabajo que demostramos desde hace muchos años, día a día, para engrandecer a este país.
And just to wrap up, this is one of the this is the work that we've been doing with during the COVID-19 pandemic. People, they reach out after weeks after the pandemic started, the stay-at-home orders from the governor and from the mayor of LA. People from the restaurant industry, we work vastly majority with the restaurant workers in the city of LA who happen to be indigenous. In contrast to Ventura County, the work of most of indigenous peoples work in the agricultural fields. Here, the restaurant cooks, every single restaurant, it's either indigenous from Mexico, Zapotecs, Ayuks, or Mayans. So we work with those industries, and now we start working also with the garment industry, who are people of indigenous migrants from Mexico and Guatemala who are in need of support. Nobody was reaching out to them. They knew about our organization and they started showing up to our offices asking for support. So that's kind of the work that we're doing. I'm just gonna stop it there so we can have time for the other panelists to present. Thank you all.
Thank you, Luis and Odalia. Next, I'd like to introduce Israel Vasquez. Israel, please reintroduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Israel Vasquez. I'm with the Ventura County Farm Worker Resource Program. I am a New Sabi, also known as a Mixteco, and I reside here in Ventura County. And I've been working with the Farm Worker Resource Program for about a year, and I will start with the presentation. The Farm Worker Resource Program is composed of 4 staff as of now. 3 of us being a trilingual speakers from different variants and community of the state of Oaxaca in the Comunidad Unsabi Mixteco. So the goal of our program is to build trust and relationship among agriculture community, assist farm worker.
Israel, did you want to share your screen?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure. I have multiple screens, so I'm trying to see which one is the one.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
This one? Okay.
There
So this is the goal of the program, assist farm workers understand the existing labor law that protects them, provide unique service, and leverage existing resources, promote and enhance the reputation of agriculture industry in Ventura, and attract farm workers. And this is how we help our community, serving as a liaison for farm workers, employers, and other representatives within the agriculture community, provide information or resource available through the state, county, and local agency, facilitating resolution at federal, state, and county regarding to labor law, regulation, policies to assist farm workers, employer, in reaching collaborate solution, and develop and evaluate education material. So this is a lot of work that we do, but like how we implement it is I think it's the unique way. So first of all, like we need to address how we address the farm workers in Ventura County, And we have our three office location, which is in Oxnard, Santa Paula, and Fillmore. All of our office are from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Here in Oxnard, here at the so our community known as the medical place or el lugar medical, and also we are available by appointment. And we also in our implementation we develop the uses of WhatsApp, because a lot of our community do use WhatsApp. That's how they communicate. Even coming from Mexico or with other place they come from, they use WhatsApp a lot. It doesn't require a lot of requirement to get a the application or get an account. So this is our basic information. And I'll address our outreach. So this is our the farm worker web page, and if you're within the county or here in Ventura County, you can go into this site and find a resource that we have developed. So reaching out the community. So in order to reach out the community, we had to develop different outreach strategies. One of them is being the way that we're reaching out. So if you can see, this is our card that we use to reach out the farm workers in the fields. This card is very small, it's very portable. And the reason that we developed this site was we understood that farm workers don't really have a place to, usually when we go to outreach, I see a lot of other organizations develop big flyers, but at the end of the day, when you give flyers to the farm workers, they might just throw it in the trash or just leave it there because they can't carry it. So you have to develop a multiple use of these flyers in order for them to keep it. So this flyer has a calendar on the back, so farm workers can also keep track of any appointment that they need in the general information of the program. So whenever addressing outreach, always remember that it has to have a multiple use in order for our community to use it, and it has to be very simplistic. And this is the this is a half sheet. It has a QR code, and they direct the community to the specific page of the website. And these are for farm workers, like community members and general community members. So we do, prior to COVID-19, we did a lot of outreach in the community. And one of the way that we outreach, because we've been involved in the community prior to even with this program. So just speaking the language is a big importance within our outreach. As soon as people see somebody that looks like them, that speaks like them, they will come to them. So we always try to be over there in the community so the community can see us. And also being very mobile. So this group meeting was at 6 in the morning in the fields, connecting with workers, farm workers, employers, and just telling them how we are serving the community, that we are here to serve the community. We speak the language. We understand the need of the community. And also using the already established outreach method, which is Radio Indígena here in Ventura County. It's a big tool that a lot of organizations could use. So in the first program that we did, we had over 1,000 views and a lot of interaction in our live Facebook. So this is prior to COVID-19. And also develop PSAs. So a lot of the PSA information that are available through the county, a lot of resource, we have developed PSA to give to the community to communicate, understand the resource available in their language. And partnerships, there's a lot of partnership, a lot of organization within Ventura County that already have it in one-on-one interaction with the community. And one of them is the Agriculture Commissioner. So one of the things that we did, we we gave our flyers to the Ag Commission to distribute with their crop report. So there was we were able to send about 500 of our information to the employers, to the owners with our information, and also establish with the COVID-19, we were able to deliver important information regarding COVID testing, regarding COVID information, how to take care of yourself, the resources available to the employers, and delivering these information in the pay staff of the farm workers. So the Ag Commissioner has been a very important partner for us. and also partnering with the Ventura County Public Health and with the backpack doctor, going with them and also sharing the information in the field with the farm workers, speaking to them directly. This is during the COVID-19 is sharing important information in their own language, and not just as an interpreter, but as a community, as a representative of the county. Developing these outreach materials in very simplistic way, less word, more picture, more way to understand for our community that don't speak the language, that don't have the educational level. A lot of the farm worker community don't read or write, so we have to develop a way for them to understand the information, very simplistic. And these flyers are available, so if anybody within this seminar wants it, they can reach out to us. And foreign communication. So the foreign communication is one of the most important ways. So one of the main one is through WhatsApp. Again, we have been delivering information, videos, voice, connecting with those farm workers that don't speak Spanish, sending them audio messages for them to understand, receiving audio messages from the community with any question, having a WhatsApp group that is only Mixteco, having another WhatsApp that is only Spanish, doing radio outreaching, creating and developing videos, and then sharing them in Facebook from the Condado de Ventura Spanish page, and friends, and the farm workers and our community members sharing the information with their friends. So these are one of the main key ways of communication with farm workers. And demographics. So here in Ventura County, it's very important to identify our community that we're serving, understand the community that exists in this county. So we've been identifying some of the community members that have been Mixteco, Zapoteco, Purepecha. So within one of the way to help our community to identify who they are, what language do they speak. So one of the problems that I have been seeing is the homogeneous classification of our community as Hispano Latino. And sometimes our community don't identify themselves as Spanish or Latino. Or if you ask them, you're indigenous, you're Mixteco, and they will not answer because that's not within some of our culture. So you have to ask them, do you speak any another language? Do you speak another language besides Spanish? So in order to identify who they are. So there is an estimated number of 30,000 Mixteco here in Ventura County, but this information is not accurate because again, all of us are being classified as Hispano Latino here. So there's still a lot of work. And to close it out, we have had a lot of successful story, but one of the successful story I say that was here that we had was a elder farm worker that was homeless, did not have food. He reached out to our program. We were able to connect with him, connect him in the language that he understood, connect them with the resource, with housing, with food, and help him to just stay, to just live here in Ventura County and connecting with resources. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Israel. Thank you for your time. Next on the panel, I'd like to introduce Arsenio Lopez from MyCop. And Arsenio, can you reintroduce yourself? Thank you.
Let me see.
Hi, I'm Arsenio Lopez. I'm the executive director with the Mixteco Indigena Community Organizing Project. Is there a way to share a screen?
Yeah, let me stop mine. There we go.
Great. Seems like I'm not allowed to share my screen.
I just made you co-host, Arsenio. Go ahead, try
Awesome.
one more time. Yep.
Great. One more time, I'm Arsenio Lopez with the Mixteco Indigena Community Organizing Project here in Ventura County. The organization started in 2001 or 2002. So we actually have an office in Oxnard, And last year, we opened our second office in the city of Santa Maria in the Santa Barbara County. Our mission is to support, organize, and empower the indigenous migrant communities in California Central Coast. I would just like to point out about the recent change in the mission of the organization, the word immigrant versus migrant, and as part of how do we start this process of decolonization or decolonize ourselves. So we believe that we haven't crossed any border, we're just migrating across this continent that is named America. So I think it's part of our, in some way, I think the change also started with our own selves, learning about our own history, the real causes of what has been mentioned before about the migration and our communities, and also how we got in this place. So one thing that, one of the programs that I would like to share today with you all is about the Indigenous language services that we do provide. So our program, we've been developing the interpreters program for the last, I will say, almost 10 years. And it's been a process. We started from basically not having any interpreters or like trained interpreters in the area to have about 75 trained interpreters at this point or at this level. And as we are also training interpreters, we're also been developing contracts with different agencies in the county as well outside the counties. A lot of the requests that we get are mostly from the Mixteco language. And one of the things that one of the ways that we also have learned how to serve our communities, but also serve the institutions that are providing services to our communities, is to help them to really identify or help them to how to identify the correct variants of their families. So I'm just putting the list here of some of the communities that we have identified in Ventura County, if not in the Santa Barbara County as well. So often when you interact with our families, there is this assumptions that you are interacting with Mixtecos from the state of Oaxaca. And I always like to tell people that we need to be really careful with that, because indigenous people, we need to remind ourselves that the country of Mexico is very diverse, 68 indigenous nations with different languages. So just in this area, we have people from Mixtecos from Oaxaca, as well as Mixteco from Guerrero. And these are some of the communities that we have identified. And also we do have Zapotecos, and as well as Purepecha communities that I didn't put their names here for some reason. So we always like to tell people to get their families name of their town, origins of towns, and their state, so we can identify the variants of their communities. So we do have other programs as well in the organization. The other programs that we have is a Tequio Youth Program that we started in 2010, 2012. And this group is being well known for one of the first campaign that they led on 2012 about No Me Llames Oaxaquita. And it's a campaign that started because of these constant, discrimination and racism that we have been seeing in our communities for not few years, but for hundreds of years since the invasion happened. So through that, we saw that discrimination happened in different ways, but one of the ways is to just call our communities minimize us probably. And our youth decided to take that. But also we provide like leadership development or leadership trainings and with our youth, as well as we started a scholarship because we have seen that constantly indigenous youth do struggle to move with their educational goals and getting a degree in colleges. So as a motivation, we started our Tequio scholarship programs probably also 10 years ago. And so far we have We started with a $5,000 funds to now be a fund of $30,000. So we're very excited with that. And just to mention some other, like 2 other programs, we also have the Immigration Legal Services Program. So we're not only providing education and outreach, but also assisting our families with their legal applications for their immigration paperwork. Like, for example, the most recently DACA, situation right now. So we are helping these youth to if they are eligible to apply for those services. And the last program that I would like to share with you is about Puentes. I'm sorry, I don't have all that program right here. I don't want to go into like the barriers and all that, what we have seen and identifying our communities, because I do know that most of this is being covered by Dr. Gaspar in his presentation yesterday. The Puentes program is basically promotoras comunitarias, or health outreach workers or case workers for our communities that they are bilingual, if not trilinguals, assisting or working with our families with the different situations that they come in our office with. They will come, having a family member in jail, or having a children be taken away from their families, not being able to get their information in the languages that they speak, and they were confused. They didn't understand all the process. They come to our office seeking for help for us to explain what that means, what that paperwork means to them. So our promotoras, often I see them not only just assisting them, but also help them to navigate through the process. We more recently are calling our promotoras also navigators, understanding and this very bureaucratic system that we are in this country. So the last thing I want to say is that as much as I want to share, very successful stories in our communities, there are many, but I think one of the things that I would like to remind everyone is that we are here to collaborate and to work together. And I will strongly recommend that not see MICOP as having the whole capacity to serve our communities and just send our families to us, because constantly what we have seen is that once any institution or agency are not being able to provide the services in a culturally and linguistically manner, they just send those families to us. And then we have to reach out again to those agencies. So I think it's first of all, I will recommend, if you don't have a contract with any interpreting agencies, that you have a contract so you can provide those services very culturally and linguistically appropriate. If not, if it's possible, we need to advocate more for more hiring of trilingual people or bilinguals, Spanish Mixteco or Spanish Zapotecos or Spanish Mixteco and English speakers and your staff. I think the changes starts in the system for serving the indigenous communities. So that's pretty much what I would like to share at this moment.
Thank you, Arsenio. Thank you for your time. Next, I'd like to introduce Euclides del Moral Arbona, Consul de Mexico here in Oxnard. Euclides, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Noe, and thank you all the organizers. Thank you also for my co-presenters. I'm very happy to be with you this morning. I'm also joined by my Deputy Consul, Jonathan Alvarez, who will share the floor with me later in the presentation. But I would start off by saying that, we thank Odilia for putting us as the consular network on the spot, because that's a very good example of how we should not treat people. Specifically, the concern that was raised, we have immediately we relate that to our counterpart in the consulate in LA, and we need more information on that case in order to follow up with that. I totally agree that it only takes one person, one insensitive person, to bring down all the efforts that we in the government are trying to to correct, or if not correct, to try to ameliorate bad practices, past bad practices where there has been intolerance or even discrimination. So in that regard, I guess we are committed. Myself, I've been consul for many years, and I'm committed to the community. I'm very well aware of the profile of our community here in Oxnard mainly. And with that, I'll start the presentation real quickly. So we have a PowerPoint presentation giving you the generics about the work that the consulate performs here in Oxnard, but at large, all the consulates across the U.S. have pretty much the same protocols. So basically, our main topics are a brief explanation of what the consulate does, some brief facts about the indigenous communities, and the engagement experience and strategies of the Mexican consulate. On that, I should say that it is always a challenge for us in government to engage with not only minorities or indigenous communities, but the whole Mexican population as a whole. We, in all my years of experience, I have seen, the mistrust, that our people have in government. And I couldn't blame them more. I mean, they are always, as Odilia said, sometimes they were forced, by migration. Migration, in terms of economic factors, push them out of their communities, and there's always that sentiment of mistrust, about government, regarding government for not having done what we should have done in their own communities. So that's introductory words. We have the largest consulate network that any country has in the U.S., 50 offices in the continental U.S. We have one in Puerto Rico. Most of them are career consulates, smaller offices like the Oxnard one. In California, we have 10 offices all across the state. So we have a large representation. Our office here in Oxnard has a jurisdiction over the Central Coast, San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura County. And this infographics tells you a little bit about the wide array of services that the Mexican consulates in general provide to the community. And we have always liked to explain the services in kind of a tripod scenario, where we have the documentation services as one leg of that tripod. Then we have the legal services or consular protection as the second one, and then the community outreach as a third leg of that tripod. Documentation, everybody knows, it's facilitating passports and matriculas or consular cards. And that's the day-to-day business that we do here at the consulate. Very important because, as in the case explained by Odilia, if someone needs an ID to get access to services, that's the main act of protection that we could provide to our community, and we should take that very, very concerned about those services. Legal services or consular protection, that's where we refer our nationals to attorneys that we have hired that provide pro bono or a reduced fee, legal assistance in many aspects of U.S. law. Specifically for child and family services, we have worked in the past, working closely with them in facilitating reunification or solving custody cases of minors that are Mexicans or that their parents are Mexicans. So I think that that's a very, very important part of the work that the Mexican Consulate does here in Oxnard and at large, as I said, in the US. And the third leg of the tripod, as I said, community outreach, very important work that we try to do with our partners, with local actors, just like my co-presenters here, Arsenio at MICOP and Israel at the Ventura County Farm Workers Resource Program, where we work, in tandem on many aspects of the situation. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we raised, the concerns that agricultural workers should have, should follow the same physical distancing protocols, hygiene protocols that were advised for the general population. And right from the beginning, we raised those concerns among, in the agricultural roundtable, trying to make sure that employers and authorities were acting on this. We as a consulate are very small and limited, our scope is very limited because we're a foreign government, not the US government. However, we always try to raise our concerns. And I think we worked very, very, the work that the Farm Worker Program has done is commendable, is very successful. We try to raise those concerns by writing op-eds, for example. There was an op-ed in the LA Times. I co-wrote an article at the Foreign Affairs Latin America magazine, also raising these concerns for the agricultural population. So again, community outreach for us, it's instrumental in terms of serving our community. Out of Mexico City, our main headquarters, we have developed these protocols for our staff, train our staff, trying to better serve vulnerable groups, that need some kind of specialized assistance. So over the years, we have developed these protocols to serve, for example, unaccompanied immigrant children, to tend to victims of gender violence, to combat human trafficking. And right now we're developing, protocols for the LGBTI community, as well as one that will be focused on the indigenous communities. And that one, we are awaiting for it anxiously to come out to see what will be the procedures to follow. This is just an image of the initial protocol that we developed to tend to the needs of unaccompanied children and minors. And with that, I will leave the floor to Jonathan to explain a little bit more about the work that we do specifically towards our indigenous community population here in Oxnard. So Jonathan, if you want to sit down over here.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan Alvarez, the Deputy Consul. Thank you very much for joining us in this presentation. And while keeping up with the Consulate's presentation, as Arsenio already mentioned, and we already saw in more depth with Professor Gaspar and Arsenio, Mexico enjoys the cultural wealth of having over 68 ethno-linguistic groups, indigenous communities in our country. Our Commission for the Development of Indigenous Communities even has an atlas with cultural information of all those communities that is available on the website that you can see on the slide. Regarding, for instance, the Mixtec community, which is the one with which we have had more contact here at the consulate, although we are aware there are more communities in Ventura County, as they were mentioning, Zapotec, Purepecha. Each of those has a vast and ancestral and very rich cultural tradition. They are incredible communities. And well, this is just some basic facts that were already covered in more depth by Gaspar and Arsenio. For instance, Mixtec is a full developed language, and it also has 81 variants, 81 different versions of Mixtec. They have a rich gastronomic tradition. They have a rich tradition in music, in agriculture, and as Arsenio was mentioning, they are not only located in the state of Oaxaca, but also in parts of the states of Puebla and Guerrero in Mexico. Now, going a little bit into the engagement experience and strategies of the Mexican consulate, we have a special program to serve indigenous immigrants called PEAMI. Basically, is that coordinating with the Mexico's National Institute for Indigenous Languages, we invite indigenous immigrants all over the USA to volunteer as interpreters and join a directory of a speaker of national languages for consular support. Therefore, when there's a very important case or an indigenous immigrant faces a very complicated situation, perhaps in courts, perhaps under the custody of immigration authorities, and there's the need for an interpreter, we can get the help of this directory to look over the people that are already registered and see if we can get their help out of goodwill to give this interpretation in these special cases. For instance, in this directory, we already have registered 229 Mixtec interpreters all over the United States. 42 of them are in California. You can see the highlights on the map on the different regions. And going to another things, we've also have developed diverse programs to have information of the diverse services that the consulate and our whole consular network offer to make them every day more easily available in indigenous languages. I have a brief video explaining that a little bit, so let me play it.
Conforme a las políticas de inclusión, hemos iniciado el cambio en la política para atender a los migrantes de origen mexicano en Estados Unidos. Nuestro compromiso es convertir a los consulados en espacios de defensa de los derechos de las personas más vulnerables. Hoy, damos un paso más para facilitar el acceso a los servicios del Gobierno de México en el exterior. Lanzamos una campaña en las 25 lenguas indígenas más habladas por nuestros migrantes en Estados Unidos, poniendo a su disposición servicios de protección, documentación, salud, educación y asesoría legal.
Consulados México, Tlencate, Estados Unidos, Williski Matlanes y Pucniwan Tlempuy, México, Juan Chanchiwa, Estados Unidos, Amok Chiwilia, Kimpiahama, Mehnosuam.
Nukulo, Otsocha Ekinem, Eretka, Kulon Kiki, Chakuya, Nonchkuilan o pasaporte, Oshkakchi, Nolka, matrícula consular, Akuntal o credencial en Botán de Chia.
Shucha tunesta Estados Unidos, tas 20 michahama cuenta trabanco, shucha gelo a cheque, shucha tzakbe hospita chanbuna nishamtak.
En los consulados, tus derechos valen.
Gobierno de México.
And well, as we see in this video, we have developed diverse introductory videos available in the 25 most widely spoken indigenous languages that are also available in our website, that we put on social media to help in this outreach effort to make this information more easily available for indigenous communities. We also have developed infographics in diverse indigenous language. For instance, this one in Mixteco regarding the services we have for immigrant women. Also, as they were mentioning, it's very important to have, if it's available, to have interpreters for the diverse services. We are fortunate to have one of our co-workers in our staff, a very good friend, his name is Abraham, that is a Mixteco interpreter of Mixteco Bajo of San Martin Peras, and he's also been a great help, not only for people that come to our consular office in Oxnard to seek information or services for their ID, like the passport or the matricula consular, but also in cases in which we have to assist immigrants that have been detained or are under the custody of immigration authorities. For instance, the picture to the right is Abraham in San Miguel, San Luis Obispo County. We've also traveled a couple times to that location to help the indigenous communities that are located there. For instance, also, we've tried, sometimes it might be easy to think that it's just as simple as just translating the materials you have to the other language. But to do the proper outreach and to really try to get to the community, it's more complex than that. And also, Mixtec, for instance, is a complete developed language. As I was mentioning, there are many variants, or sometimes due to diverse circumstances, people enjoy it more as an oral tradition. I mean, they do not use it more in writing, but more on speaking. So it's important to have it available on videos, to have interpreters. And our Mixteco interpreter has also helped us to diverse outreach efforts. For instance, this one we did with different organizations to promote the United States Census, and we made a video in Mixteco. Let me show it as an example.
Pues yo, mexicano, cano yo acuña, coba país, Estados Unidos, yo, chacano cuña, ante bono censo, cuya 2020 yo, censo cuñi, tutu natachu, nakumichu, y luego, hasta cuando ya digo, no país, Estados Unidos, yo, tutu yo, chatachu naña, ta uti cuya, chacunta y bego, ni cuya 2020 yo, cano yo acuña, de eco, no censo, ña cuya 2020 yo, tapakunina, nisana, kumichu, canata iñu, no Congreso, en el país, Estados Unidos, yo. Censo yo, chacano fui, tapakunina, chinchena, tuba escuela, tuba yichi, tuba beno, kutatana. Cuendi tuña, kumpa, cuenita, censo yo, tanita, censo, kungu fui, cano fui, tapakunina, nisata, ku, chasa, ku, guana. Ñuno ye kwani baso po tutu kwani chakunde kwani no censo yo marzo yo punta tutu nya censo correo de kwani ta cuantas kutu kwania sani kundas kutu kwani tutu censo yo no correo nya internet nya uniletra www.census.gov o ko utatika abrir yo ti nya tachung kwani tutu censo yo ato mandachung kwaninya chakunza inina tane censo peeri nandane censo yo chakweti niño kakana número seguro kwani kweti niño kakana número cuenta nya banco kwani kweti niño kakana tarjeta de crédito kwani kuna kwani yo marzo si abril yo kano kuña tipo de no censo nya 2020 yo somos vecinos. Todos contamos. Y otro vecino, no puede hacer censo yo.
And well, this is just a brief glimpse of the different services and outreach strategies we do have. This is a picture of the team of the consulate and the diverse ways to get in contact with the consulate. We have obviously the number in our office. For appointments, we use a system called Mexitel. Also, we have a hotline available with 24/7 information of the consular services of our whole consular network. And we have an emergency hotline for the cases, as the consul was mentioning, for consular protection, legal affairs, and all the labor that the consulate does to help protect those that are in the most need. We have email, we have website, we have our social media, and well, also the great work we do with our community partners. Thank you very much for inviting us to this presentation. And here we are to listen to comments, questions, and whatever I need. So I give the floor again to the consul, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you again. Thank you for having us. And that will be everything on our side, and ready to take some questions.
Thank you very much. At this particular time, we're going to bring up some questions that came through the chat box, and we'll have our panel answer accordingly.
Okay, so we have about 3 questions, and then we do need to kind of move on to the next activity. So let's, if folks want to put their questions in the chat, even if we can't get to them today on the webinar, we will be sure and get to them and share them after the webinar. But we have a few questions. One of the questions was, does the agency, and I was assuming it meant CFS, have, or do we keep records, or does the agency keep records of the number of Indigenous families that is served? And so Noe, I'm not sure if you know the answer to that question.
To my knowledge, I don't believe we do identify or track families in terms of Indigenous. I think it's really limited in terms of just language, but information that is placed in CMS, we are able to extract it if we obtain it. And I don't know if we would be able to extract that in terms of like birth or language, but our CWCMS system is limited. And I don't know if there's any efforts to pursue such tracking and identification processes within our current systems.
Okay, thank you. The next question is it possible to get a point of contact with the consulate or one point of contact with the consulate for the agency to arrange visits for children to visit families in Mexico?
Oh, definitely. We will refer to our Council for Legal Affairs and Protection. So we can probably later exchange his direct contact info. Probably some of you have known him in the past, Javier Cerritos. He is the one that oversees the legal protection department.
Great. Okay. A couple more questions. There's a question about, is there a reason why the consulate in LA does not have interpreters? Many have heard from community members saying that they do not offer those services and wonders if these services are only available in Ventura.
Right. Well, no, I mean, all the services that we provide and the information, has been tried to translated into Indigenous languages. It is available on our websites of each consulate. Certainly, not all consulates have been able to hire, Indigenous staff that speaks at least the most common variant of an Indigenous language. So in that regard, we are lucky here in Oxnard to have Abraham on our staff, even though he obviously can only speak one of the variants of the Mixteco language itself. But yeah, it's always a challenge. But I will make sure I transmit that concern to my counterpart in LA, the Consul General, because yes, that's a directive that we have from central offices, try to serve all our community.
Thank you. I think we'll take one more question. I think this is for you, Arsenio. So what's the best way to connect a family to MyCop?
Yeah, definitely. They can call, they can call our office number, 805-483-1166. They can get all our information on our website, mixteco.org. Yeah, they have to be very specific to what are the needs of the family so we can identify who from our staff will be taking the case. We have staff with 65 individuals, so we have 20 different programs, and we need to be able to identify who should we direct the families to. One thing I want to clarify or to reinforce, I think as part of the language services that we do provide, we are strongly working on trying to minimize this confusion or this I don't know if it's misinterpretation about how do we classify our languages. It's not Mixteco Alto, Bajo, Costa. That's more about regional geographic areas that it describes the geographic areas of, in this case, Oaxaca. But that's why in my presentation, I was strongly suggesting that people or caseworkers should get the clients or families village or town's name and the state. Because in the Mixteco language itself, well, I'm not a linguistic, but they have identified about 80 to 100 different variants. Mm-hmm. Just in the Ventura County, we have identified no less than 30 different variants. Yeah. And it's pretty difficult for you as a caseworker when you have an emergency with your families and you're reaching out to us and say, I need a Mixteco Bajo interpreter. It's like, wait, who should I be getting from our staff to help you with that family. So I will really recommend strongly to just start doing that. Like get the name of the name of the village or town of your family and the state. And with that information, you will be able to, and if you are working with us, with MICOP, providing us with that information will be more efficient at the first time, other than just Mixteco Alto, Mixteco Bajo. That doesn't tell us anything in terms with the variants.
Thank you, Arsenio.
A quick comment. I think I answered one of the questions without even knowing on the Q&A. There was a question in Spanish that said something regarding the Mexitel, and that not all community members are able to read in Spanish, or I mean in our native languages. I think that is really important. We have seen across the board, not just with the Mexican consulate, but also with other organizations moving into the writing systems. Let's remember that these communities, the writing system was not created by our communities. It's created by outside forces, academics, governmental institutions, or any other people that want to write the system. So not everyone can read, especially in my community. I don't think my dad will be able to read something that is written in Mixteco. He speaks Mixteco clearly. That's the #1 language spoken at the house, but that language cannot be read in him. So I think it's important to work on something to bring awareness on this, because that is a little elitism on the writing system. So most of our languages are oral and are spoken. So I think that bringing this to light helps when we need services on indigenous interpretation, because it helps. And like Arsenio said, the classifications of Mixteco, Alto, Bajo, or La Costa, I think these were concepts that were created by anthropologists during the 1920s in Mexico, and that doesn't help us a lot. We get those codes too from across the country, looking from Mixteco Bajo, and that can be from 40 to 80 different variants. So it doesn't really help us. So I think creating this awareness on just, identifying the village, the town, the municipality, and then the state in Mexico where they come from, that helps us on trying to get a better, or an interpreter that has been trained in that variant.
Thank you, Luis.
And to add to Luis, which is very important, this is Olilia, I highly recommend, for whatever agency that you use, never use volunteer interpreters. Never use the kids. Never call Mexico and use a volunteer interpreter, and I'll tell you why. One, I will do a very clear example. When I say interpreter, Benesh de Dijadao, the person that transmits the sacred word. I have to know what an interpreter does in order to relate that message in this new world. If I say another word, I had a dream, I literally say, the soul of the night spoke to me. But I cannot say that in a court of law. I have to say dream. I have to be able to create this. So when we don't know the U.S. legal system, and we don't know the U.S. medical system, and the Department of Children's Services, or any institution, if we don't know the knowledge of how it works, we would be borrowing a lot from Spanish. So if you're saying, tu doctor, gagunere, enfermedad, niño cho, I'm not interpreting, I'm not sending a message. And it's a violation of the client's, patient's, defendant's human rights, but it's also a violation of the interpreter's human rights, because you're not paying them, and you're making them liable. In this case, for a court, for if their children's services, their kids have been removed, they go to the court, you're making them liable for any misinterpretation. And that's a violation of both parties' human rights violations. So I highly suggest work with the organizations. In San Ventura County, you have MICOP. In LA, you have Cielo. In Fresno, you have Centro Binacional. In DC, you have Mayan League. In San Francisco, you have Mayav. There are organizations. We're all working together to train our interpreter, because the biggest complaints of the courts right now is the lack of training and code of ethics of our interpreters. So if you get them from Mexico on a volunteer basis, they have to go to their nearest village to get to a city, and nobody pays them. Do you think that's right? I have to take the bus, pay for my hotel, pay for my food. You are an institution. You just told me as a consulate, you are here to protect our rights. So don't be part of violating our rights too here in the US. Do not use volunteer interpreters, and especially untrained interpreters. And I'm telling you this from a human rights advocate from the point of view of a trilingual interpreter. That is a violation of our human rights.
Thank you, Aurelia. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. I want to thank all the panelists for your time and your perspectives and your knowledge and inspiring our continual growth and in working with all Indigenous peoples. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to take the floor. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you all. I'm going to turn this over to Janice Boafo, practice coach, and Wandro Garley, our CRA manager from CWDS, to lead this next activity. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Amy. So my name is Wandro Garley, and I'm the program manager for the Cultural Responsiveness Academy. And this is a program within the CWDS, which is with the Academy for Professional Excellence. And just to give you a little bit of information about this program, it was established in 2016. And this was to support child welfare staff and leaders in their efforts to achieve equity in their organization, and also to confront issues of disproportionality and disparity of services that impact, children and families that come into contact with the agency. The CRA provides a unique learning experience that allows participants to explore their own cultural differences, recognize potential individual and organizational biases, and also practice culturally responsive behaviors through facilitated discussions in the classroom. It is designed to create a space for self-assessment, the development of skills and strategies to identify and manage bias, and also the opportunity to contribute to a project that will improve culturally responsive practice across the organization. So just to give you the definition that we use in our program when we're talking about culturally responsive practice, because as you know, there are several terms out there. We use cultural humility, cultural competence, cultural awareness. There are so many different lenses when we're looking at, how are we really responsive to the families that we work with? And the definition that we use is that this is one's ability to really know their own culture and how it impacts their understanding of other people's culture and their way of life. It's also their ability to deepen their understanding of other people and therefore understanding the reasons behind the choices that they make. And it's also to recognize others as individuals and effectively communicate with them based on their own individual needs in order to provide culturally appropriate services. And lastly, it's to identify and utilize community resources on behalf of the person receiving those services. So that's the definition that we use. So it's all encompassing, really looking at who we are as individuals and others that we do come into contact with, and what does that relationship look like? Because we're all bringing something to the table. So as we heard earlier today, we have listened to various stories from our community members and from our community partners. sharing their own experiences. And now we'll have an opportunity to hear from some of our CFS staff that have done some work around this in completing their tree of life. And it's really important for us, you know, as agency staff and CFS staff, to be comfortable in knowing our own story and how this contributes to the relationship that we have with others. And often in our experiences, you know, in our work, our focus really is about asking other people questions about their story. And so this is now an opportunity, like I mentioned, you know, with cultural responsiveness, is knowing who we are and what we bring to our perception of others and into the relationship. So moving along, it's my pleasure now to introduce Virgie Dumkar, and she will be sharing her experience with the Tree of Life. And so Virgie, I'll turn it over to you. If you can please tell us what your role is in CFS. And then when you're sharing your story, if you can start with, you know, sharing what was the most valuable piece about this activity.
Hey, my name is Virgie. I am an office assistant. I work with the placement team as well as the CFT scheduling team. I have been with the agency going on 2 years, and this experience for the Tree of Life was a good experience. I discovered a lot more about myself than I would have thought that I would have just looking at this on a piece of paper. I was able to identify, you know, just about my background and, you know, why I am the way I am when I thought about my family and, you know, starting from the beginning. And I think that not just for myself, but we shared it as the placement team, and we all as a group found that the values were the same in doing this activity. And you can see my tree that's up there, my non-artistic abilities, but it's okay. I didn't know where to start with it. And I think I realized in doing this, I mean, I know I've always had a passion in working for children because I've done it for my whole life career. Before working here, I worked with children in early childhood education. I was a preschool director. And I think going back down into looking at the roots of where I come from a line of teachers. So definitely teaching is a passion, and always being around children, babysitting when I was young, and it's just something I have a strong passion for. So just realizing where it came from my grandmothers, it came from my aunts, it came from my mom, it came from my sister. So I think that was a really big value in this activity, considering I work for CFS now.
Okay, thanks, Virgie. So if you want to share some of the challenges, because as we know, those of us who are social workers, it's, you know, like I mentioned earlier, we're really great at asking questions. So when you think about doing your own introspective work and then also sharing with others, what was that experience like for you?
So I think the biggest challenge for this was actually getting started. I started with just drawing a tree, reading the directions a couple of times to really just wrap my head around what was being asked of me. And just knowing which direction to go in, because your mind, at least for myself, my mind was going in so many different directions on where I could go with this tree. And I felt like I was skipping around, and I would go from one way to the next, and it to me wasn't making sense when I was doing it. And then when we were sharing our trees, my challenge was, okay, I volunteered to be the first one in our group to share my tree, and since my thoughts were all over the place, I didn't know how this was gonna go. And I didn't have the confidence in sharing all of this raw information that I had, because as you can see, just it's not a lot of writing that I put on there. It was more bullet points and just talking about these bullet points with the team and just understanding. And I was really afraid to put myself out there with my team, even though I have a really good relationship with the team I work with. It was still hard to be able to put myself out there and be vulnerable.
So building on that, so what would be some takeaways when we're thinking about your experience and experiences that families may have in sharing their own stories?
I think that my biggest takeaway was in sharing was realizing, once everybody on my team shared, that we are all very similar and in our passions and what we do, and it makes sense to why we work for this agency. I think for families, it could be intimidating to have to share this information and put themselves in a vulnerable position when they are already in a vulnerable position. Like I said, I've been a center director before, and I have had experiences with families where they do share stuff from their past with me about things that have happened. And I know it's not easy for someone to their information, as it wasn't easy for me to share my information. And I think that doing this, the team that I work with, we all have an understanding for somebody who would be putting themselves in a vulnerable situation to share information that is sensitive to them, or you know, they may be scared to share, you know, and just have that understanding. And since we all have done this project on my team, we could probably understand what it feels like to be in their shoes. This was a very powerful activity for our team, as we shared, just like when Judy shared today, how I was in tears when Judy was sharing, and that's how our team was when we shared. It was very powerful to share our stories and to not have that vulnerability and have the tears. And when we shared, there was not one dry eye in our group, and we learned a lot from each other, and I have a better understanding for my team and why we all are the way we are. And I think it was a good activity, and I truly enjoyed the process.
Thank you, Virgie, for your candor. I'll now turn it over to Janice, and she will be speaking with our next presenter.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce Laura Carmona. Let's see, I'm looking for Laura on my screen. There you are. Can you tell us a little bit about your role at the organization and a little bit about your tree?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Laura Carmona. I'm a senior manager with the department. I've worked for the department for close to 20 years. Started off as a student worker, have gone through many positions within the department, and currently am a senior manager with the executive team, and I've done several programs throughout the department and been in several roles. In terms of the tree, so there's a picture of mine. I tease that it looks like a 12-year-old drawing, but that's because I actually did it with my 12-year-old son, and really was an opportunity for us to just talk about, or for me to share with him kind of my life experience and background and growing up and some of the dynamics in our family and his history and our history, I guess, as a family. For me, I think I didn't, maybe part of my personality, I didn't really follow the directions in a lot of detail. I kind of read the directions a couple of times, just like Virgie shared, and really just kind of did some reflection. And so at the base of mine, the roots, I think, was the easiest part for me in terms of knowing kind of my background and my upbringing and what was important in my family. And how that has shaped who I am, and who I am is how I practice, and how I practice is, as a social worker when I was doing, frontline work, has shaped my leadership and how I lead now. And so at the roots, the things that I think stuck out for me were really around family and community. And, I grew up in Oxnard. I went to public school in Oxnard. Sure, I went away to school and got my education, and that was always, a big value in my family. It wasn't a matter of if I wanted to go to college, it was, where I was going to go to college. And so that was always really instilled in the beginning. Having an involvement in the community. My mom wasn't a social worker, but she did work for a social service, in fact, for our human services agency. And my dad was very vocal in, just politics and like I said, community to begin with. And so there was always this, my sister is a teacher, and so there was always this sense of giving back to the community. And, my parents would say, yes, you go off, get your education, but you bring that education back to the community that you're a part of. And so I think what was important to me, or, what this reminded me, this activity reminded me, is why we do the work that we do, why I do the work that I do, why I joined this organization, and how I choose to approach the work. And, so some of the thoughts that come, if you'll see on the kind of doing the right thing, no matter how hard that it is. And really at the center of the base of that tree is this statement that I constantly am reminding myself of, in terms of, what if it were you? Me, my family. I've had a unique experience with our organization. Like I said, I've been in multiple roles, from clerical all the way up to the position that I'm in now. I've been a relative caretaker. I've been part of a support network for extended family who have gone through our system. And so some of those experiences have been positive, and some have been negative. And so it's really pushed me to reflect on the leadership that I provide in this organization, in terms of our policies, our practices, how we engage with one another, both within the walls and with our families that we serve, and really trying to remember that what if it were me? What if it were my grandmother? What if it were my niece or nephew? What if it were my neighbor? My son goes to school in Oxnard. What if it was one of his classmates or his baseball teammates? And so I think it really reminded me that there is a child and a family at the end of every single conversation, every single policy, every single action that we do. There's a child at the end of that who has a family who loves them. Sure, those families might be in crisis. They might be having some challenges. But and I think, Judy's comment earlier really touched me, in terms of, but we are the force, and we make a choice to be a helper in that situation. And so really wanting to guide the way that we practice, and making the choice to be a positive force in that family at the time that they are possibly in crisis or in need.
Thank you for sharing about your values and about how you came to the Tree of Life activity. I wanted to know if you can share about what challenged you about this, and then a little bit of what is your takeaway, whether it be in your unique role or personally.
Sure. I think the interesting piece was the challenge that I had was actually around the seeds and the legacy piece. I'm not sure if that's a personality factor or, but when I sort of saw the question around, what legacy do you want to leave? And so I look at that for myself, and I just I don't know that I've ever conceptualized that. I don't know that I've ever sort of taken the moment to stop and reflect and think, or even just think of myself in a sense of leaving a legacy. I am extremely passionate about the work that we do. I have dedicated my entire adult career to this organization. Like I said, I came as a student worker at, 18, and I've been with this department since. And so and not because there weren't other options or, but because I truly am committed to this work. And I think what we do is very important and very powerful. And yet, I can say that now because over the last few days I've been thinking about why that was so challenging. And so I think it just gives me an opportunity to realize that my story is not fully written yet, and it's time for me to maybe do some self-reflection, and it's an opportunity to think about kind of the impact that I have and move more from just doing an action and passion to really understanding influence and really understanding that, I may be committed to doing really good work and really, helping people, but what's that lasting effect? And I think it's time to, just do some personal reflection a little bit more. In terms of takeaways, I think really the number one thing, like I said, in having the unique experience that it could be, and it has been, my family and my community who were impacted by the things that we do every day. The takeaway that I have is really around kind of we've all experienced, I know every single one of us on this call has experienced some level of experience of trauma or crisis, whether it be medical, whether it be, feelings of loss, whatever that may be. We've all had those experiences. And it was actually a friend who helped me kind of conceptualize this, but we have resources available to us, right? Most of us are highly educated. We are clearly professionals. We have access to the resources that the county provides and medical insurance and things of that nature. And being in a situation of crisis, I think sometimes we have to tap into those resources, and it's difficult and it's challenging. And so the takeaway that is kind of related back to understanding the experience of the family on the other end when they are in crisis, and maybe they don't have the resources that we have, and maybe they don't have the support or the education or the experience or even just the confidence to be able to navigate a system. When I sat on the experience as a family, and I understand this system, I understand how the nuances and the laws and the regulations and the sense of helplessness that I felt in that moment. And so recognizing that our families, the experience that they have when they come to us, they're scared, they're in crisis. And so knowing, again, how we interact and how we engage is going to make all the difference.
Beautiful, thank you. It sounded like your takeaway was really about keeping connected to the head and the heart. I love it. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Wanjura, and Faith.
Thank you, Janice. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Faith Granitz. So Faith, if you can, so you have shared your tree. If you can tell us what your role is in CFS, and also tell us your experience, what you found valuable about working on this activity.
Hi, good morning. My name is Faith. I am a child welfare social worker with Children and Family Services in the Family Search and Engagement Unit, which is a specialized unit within the permanency program. My assignment with all of my cases is secondary, so I team with the primary social worker in an effort to increase rates of permanency and increase familial connections. And then in terms of what I found valuable, this was actually the second time I've done this activity. I did it earlier this month in my unit meeting. And then about a year and a half ago, I did it during one of the work groups that I participate in. And so both times I've really valued this opportunity to learn more about my coworkers. More recently, I got to hear my supervisor's tree of life, and it's, we're always talking about, thickening the story with our clients and broadening the perspective, but it's rare in my experience to kind of turn it around on ourselves. So I thought that was really valuable. And just comparing my two trees, I actually found my tree that I did a while back the other day, and I was comparing them. And it was interesting to see the differences. There was a lot of similarities, but there was some subtle differences. For example, a year and a half ago, I had put one of my branches, which are supposed to reflect your hopes and dreams, I had put, that I was going to be debt free. At that time, I was in a lot of credit card debt, and I've since paid it off, but I'd kind of forgot about it and how heavy it had been weighing on me at the time. And so it was nice to see and kind of give myself a pat on the back that, like, oh, I've accomplished that. There's other things, like I want to get my LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. And so that it was a kind of this reminder that, oh, you still haven't achieved that. You're still working towards that goal. And then it was interesting to see how current events kind of shifted my, what my hopes, what my focus was, what my priorities were. Because when I did this the first time, my kids were much younger, like 2 and 4 at the time. And I think the only goal I had that pertained to them was this desire to be able to spend more time with them. But when I did it this time, it was, I want to say like a week or two after George Floyd was murdered, and there was, protesting, and I, was having a hard time really focusing on my work. And so I had this on my mind, this idea of really wanting to, really like wanting my children to become critical thinkers and, speak out against, structural racism and implicit bias, and how can I do that? And so when I did the tree this time, I put, that it was important for me to have my children grow up to be kind and well educated. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. So thinking about any challenges in terms of, going in introspective, you did mention that you had done this twice, so this was your second time. So if that even felt easier for you, or, just what that experience was like, and then also being able to share, with your peers, what that felt like.
So I think it was challenging both times that I did it. It was a little bit different, the setup. The first time I did it, I was paired like one-on-one with someone. We kind of like broke into these pairs. And so it was me sharing my tree with her and her sharing her tree with me. And then this time it was me sharing my tree with my whole unit. But on both occasions, there was this, this fear of judgment. I had this internal dialogue where I was asking myself, do you sound stupid right now? Is something you're saying going to offend somebody? The challenging part was being vulnerable with people that you work with.
Okay, thank you. So from that, what would be your takeaway in terms of applying this to your work with families?
I wrote down a couple things. I'm trying to think what I want to say. One takeaway, for me, it was kind of mentioned earlier, was just that I, had a really hard time doing this activity. It was hard for me to feel vulnerable, and with our clients, we kind of expect that of them, all the time. When I was in the court unit, I was doing these comprehensive assessments, and I'd ask super incredibly personal questions like, tell me about your childhood or your relationship with intimate partners. And so it was kind of like this wake up call, because I had a really hard time just sharing it with my peers, where my biggest worry was, am I going to sound silly? And our families are really, dealing with so much more than that. They're worried, you know, what's going to happen to them? You know, are you going to take my children? And it's with a complete stranger versus, you know, someone that you know and you see, you know, on a regular basis in the workplace. And then the other takeaway, I haven't done this yet, but I would like to try the Tree of Life activity with some of the youth that I work with. They're primarily teenagers. A lot of them have been in the system for a long time. A few of them have been in the system for over a decade. And so I can see doing this activity with them, like being really powerful and allowing me to glean all kinds of information that can help me do my job more effectively. Not only would it be helpful to kind of hear in the youth's own voice what, like, you know, where they come from and what they're aspiring toward, but also who are the important people to them, you know, either past or present, which can, you know, provide me with a little bit of guidance in terms of like how I do my work.
All right, thank you so much, Faith. And at this point, I'll turn it back to Janice, and she'll close us out talking about the next activity and the symposium.
All right, I'm back. I just want to thank Virgie and Laura and Faith again for the vulnerability and the willingness to share your stories, to share your experience of the Tree of Life. That vulnerability, that honesty is really a strength. And it reminds us that this is a collective work that we're doing moving forward. It's something that we must do together. I just have a couple of notes. And I think these are sentiments that were echoed throughout all of the speakers today. Just a reminder that we're a community that has impact. There is great power in this space today. And as many people have shared, it's a power to build or it's a power to break. And so we have a call to be very mindful of how we wield our power and how we move in this space with each other and in our community. Being inclusive and equitable in responding to culture is an ongoing and challenging work. We're challenging ourselves. We're also called to challenge our systems, and it requires us to have daily practice and to be relentless, as many people have stated. So where do we go from here? One way to continue this work that's been started with the Tree of Life and with these conversations in the webinars is to revisit the Tree of Life and also to continue it. So on the screen, you guys will see there's a part 2 to the Tree of Life questions. And the call is for you to do self-reflection, continued self-reflection on each of these questions, and then to take them back to your teams, to your colleagues, to our teams, to our colleagues, and continue the conversation. And so the questions on the screen seem to be a little self-explanatory, but I'm just going to kind of break them down. The first one, how would you define your cultural background? There is often a bias that we lean typically towards racial, ethnic identity, but this question is asking you to really look a little bit deeper. What are your multiple identities? How do you call yourself? You know, for example, I'm a Black woman with an immigrant African father and a white mother who grew up in a multicultural Latino immigrant community. That's much of my culture. So look at yourself in terms of who are you? What are your many cultural backgrounds? How do you identify? And then take a look, as many of the panelists talked about earlier, and explore under what conditions did your family come to this place that you currently are in? How do you identify yourself? Do you look at yourself as an immigrant? Do you look at that family experience really being one of migration? Or was there a refugee experience? Was there a period of enslavement? How did you come to be in this land? And then the other questions are talking about, what do you most identify with? And really the sub question of that is, what do you have the most comfort owning, holding, calling out? And the second piece being, what do you struggle with? And how does your culture impact what you have difficulty holding on to, calling out, sharing with other people? And then really the connection to the communities that we serve and that we operate in is about, what impact do your cultural identities have on the work that you do with families? How do they impact you working with people who are identified as similar to you? How does that impact you working with people who have dissimilar backgrounds? Let's see. So just a reminder that, as the struggles in communities nationally and really across the globe, as Ms. Odelia Romero and Arsenio Lopez talked about, just migration, talked about systemic injustices that are happening across the world. And as media has highlighted some of the recent struggles that are being brought to attention because of a strong media cycle in regards to Black people's struggles in the United States, we're reminded that people want and need to be seen, respected, and connected. And the first slide, activist Didi Delgado said that our narrative is our humanity. Every single day we're presented with the great opportunity to really see each other, to connect with one another, and to know the stories of the people that we're in community with. And although this is a peak, there's a moment of, again, media attention, this is not a new time for us. We've heard this call before. And the questions really are, how will we answer the calls this time? Where do we see and acknowledge and respond to intersections in the work that we individually do? How do we honor our multiple identities, our whole selves, and those of the people that we serve? And finally, what is your role in just social work practice? Who do you want to be?
Thank you, Janice and Wanderu. So Noe, would you like to do the closing?
Yes, thank you, Amy. First, I want to thank everybody and everybody for your undivided attention and all of those who participated and honored us with your presence, with your knowledge and your perspectives. Muchas gracias to everybody. Change in our hearts and change in our minds and change in our hands. It is in our hands. Today is the day we launch into a journey of change. Let me share a journey. I'm not from here and I'm not from there. I stand here today as a product of this society, and I have benefited from good teachers, counselors, mentors, faith-based leaders, supports, and a family who believed in me and never gave up, despite me causing a bunch of problems. I'm also here because I've had my share of society's responses, being placed in the special ed classroom because I spoke Spanish, being paddled by administrators or vice administrators, being suspended, having parent-teacher conferences where I had to interpret for my parents, and also expressing all the academic achievements and the stellar behavior that I had on campus. That was not true. I had to navigate those interactions. When my parents could not speak or read or write Spanish, I often found myself having to justify my parents to others who did not understand the migrant worker or the migrant laborer. In a system where your parents would ask, why did the teacher change your name? In a society that assigns you remedial classes based on your name and hearing that you would be better off in auto shop. In my role as interpreter for my parents, I found myself often having to rephrase what was being said in English because I knew if I translated what was actually being said, it would not end up well. In a society where you worked hard to assimilate and acculturate, well, not assimilating too much because there are ramifications in the Mexican community that I grew up with, because you would often be called a pocho or a sellout or a vendido. In a society that pushed for Proposition 187, English only, and a society that treated you differently based on the language you spoke, how you dressed, where you lived. In a society where it was common to get beat down by police if you were hanging out with your friends in the park, or if your parents drove an old car, where cocaine and crack sales put dollars in your pockets, and the temptation to obtain easy money in order to attempt to become accepted in a society, where you had to watch your back all times, and despite doing what you thought was a legitimate path to be accepted, nothing changed. I was still a wetback. I was still the gardener. I was still the laborer. I was still el pocho, and I was still that migrant worker who worked from sunup to sundown, but now I'm honored to be proud to be so. And I feel blessed to have had the upbringing I did and for the parents that I have. As I can see now the level of sacrifices they made for me and my siblings. Rest assured, it was not easy. I now see the journey my parents walked, and it was not my family, nor it was my parents, it was society. As they did the best with what they had, and we found out that what was feasible for others was impossible for my family. The journey, I am not from here and I am not from there. Colleagues, esteemed social workers, leaders, community leaders, advocates, today's the day we walk through this journey. We must challenge years of beliefs in order to change the trajectory of child welfare from a middle-class system that has historically been disproportionate to families of color, a system that has obligated families to change and to meet the needs of the child welfare system versus a system that meets the needs of families in their communities. I challenge you to dig deep, feel vulnerable, open up, face the ambiguities, face the fears, sacrifice, pause, and explore your belief systems, and identify your triggers and your anxieties of vulnerability. It is time to stand and walk together and break the disproportionate overrepresentation of children of color in the child welfare system, a system that has promoted inequity and at times has imposed a foreign familial construct on the spirit of a child and their family. I challenge you to ponder the impact if we fail to lead or hesitate to change the pillars of our practice. Stop, observe, and reflect. As you can see, our society and systems need to change. Today is that day. We can all agree that change is needed, and we all know that change is not easy. Consider what is occurring today in our society and what role do we have to bring about change? What world do we want to leave for our children? As child welfare social workers, change is ingrained in our DNA. Change is the foundation of our code of ethics, and bringing about change is our duty. As a child welfare social worker, it is our duty to speak for the silent, advocate for the oppressed, represent the marginalized, represent the minorities, identify and call out the intentions and the unintentions of policies and practice. Be proactive, hold each other accountable. And I'm calling out to identify what is not tolerable and what is intolerable. While embracing the spirit of children and families, change is our charge. It is time to embrace families and their journeys. It is time to walk along families and build them up. It is time for the child welfare system to honor families so that tomorrow their children can reflect back and not have to question their history, their identity, or their journey. It is time to believe in the power of family and supports, and I challenge you to stand with me today and the child welfare system while we protect children by strengthening families. Thank you.